The rope was already prepared. Elara Quinn had 12 hours left to live when they offered her the deal. Walk into Cale Varen's canyon and teach the most wanted man in the territory how to speak the language of his enemies, or hang at sunrise. She was 25 years old, a schoolteacher convicted of murder, and nobody expected her to survive either option. But what the army didn't tell her was that Cale Varon wasn't just a killer. He was something far more dangerous than that. And the moment she crossed into his world, everything she thought she knew about survival, loyalty, and herself would be torn apart. If you're ready to find out what happens when a condemned woman walks into the fire and refuses to burn, stay with me until the end. And if this story grabs you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. The heat in the cell was unbearable. Elara sat against the stone wall with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the square of light coming through the bars. Outside, somewhere beyond the prison yard, the desert stretched endlessly in all directions. She'd been counting the days since the trial ended, but now there was no point. Tomorrow morning, they'd walk her to the gallows. The sentence had been clear. No appeals, no mercy. She'd killed a man. That part was true. What wasn't true was the story they told about why. The door at the end of the corridor clanged open. Boots echoed on stone. Elara didn't move. She'd learned months ago that looking up only made things worse. Let them come. Let them say whatever they needed to say. It didn't matter anymore. But the footsteps stopped outside her cell, and a voice she didn't recognize said, "Stand up, Quinn." She lifted her head slowly. Two men stood outside the bars. One was a prison guard she'd seen before, thick-necked and bored. The other was older, lean, with a colonel's insignia on his dust-covered uniform. His eyes were pale and sharp, the kind that saw everything and gave nothing back. "On your feet," the colonel said again. Elara pushed herself up. Her legs were stiff from sitting too long. She faced him without speaking. The colonel studied her for a moment, then nodded to the guard. The cell door swung open. "Come with me." She didn't ask where. There was nowhere left to go except the gallows, and that wasn't until morning. She followed him down the corridor, past rows of empty cells, through a heavy door, and into a small room with a table and two chairs. The guard stayed outside. The colonel gestured to one of the chairs. "Sit." Elara sat. The colonel remained standing. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and set it on the table between them, but he didn't open it. Instead, he looked at her like he was weighing something. "You were a school teacher," he said. "Yes." "Before the conviction?" "Yes." "You taught reading, writing, grammar, languages." Elara's jaw tightened. "What does that have to do with anything?" The colonel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Everything, Miss Quinn, because right now you have two options. You can hang tomorrow morning like the court ordered, or you can do something useful with the time you have left." She stared at him. "Useful?" "That's right." "For who?" "For your country. For the people trying to stop a war before it starts." He leaned forward slightly, resting his knuckles on the table. "There's a man in the Red Canyon. His name is Cale Varon. You might have heard of him." Elara had. Everyone had. Cale Varon was a ghost story and a nightmare rolled into one. A warlord who commanded the canyon strongholds. A man the army had been trying to kill or capture for years. They called him the Wolf. Some said he'd been a soldier once. Others said he was born in the wild and never learned to be anything else. What everyone agreed on was that he was dangerous, ruthless, and impossible to corner. "I've heard the name," Elara said carefully. "Good. Then you know what kind of man he is." The colonel straightened. "We've been negotiating with him, trying to broker a treaty, end the raids, stop the bloodshed, bring some kind of order to the territory. But there's a problem. He doesn't speak English." The colonel's eyes narrowed. "He speaks enough to insult us. Not enough to read a treaty document or understand the terms we're offering. And none of his people trust our translators. They think we're trying to trick them." He paused. "They're not entirely wrong." Elara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "So you want me to teach him?" "Yes." "Why me?" "Because you're expendable." The colonel said it without hesitation, without cruelty. Just fact. "You're already sentenced to die. If Varon kills you, we've lost nothing. If he doesn't, If you manage to teach him enough that he can read and understand what we're offering, then maybe we avoid a war that'll cost thousands of lives. And what do I get? You get to live. For now. Maybe longer, if you're useful enough. Alara looked down at the table. The wood was scarred and stained, marked by years of people sitting exactly where she sat now, making choices that probably didn't matter. She thought about the rope, about the crowd that would gather to watch her drop, about the way her mother's face had looked the last time she'd visited, hollow and ashamed. She thought about the man she'd killed, and she thought about walking into the canyon where Kael Varon lived, alone, with nothing but a language book and a death sentence hanging over her head. "When do I leave?" she asked. The colonel smiled again. This time it almost looked real. "Tonight." They gave her a horse, a canteen, a bedroll, and a leather satchel containing a grammar primer, a dictionary, and a stack of treaty documents she wasn't allowed to open. No weapon, no escort. The colonel made it clear that if she tried to run, they'd hunt her down and hang her anyway. If she made it to the canyon, she was on her own. "Varen's people will find you," the colonel said as she mounted the horse. "Don't fight them. Don't lie. Tell them you're there to teach. If they believe you, you'll live long enough to start. If they don't," he shrugged, "well, you were going to die tomorrow anyway." Alara didn't answer. She turned the horse toward the mountains and rode. The desert gave way to scrubland, then to rocky hills that climbed steadily upward. By the time the sun set, she was deep in territory she'd only heard about in whispers. The Red Canyon, the stronghold, the place where the army's patrols disappeared and never came back. She made camp in a shallow ravine, built a small fire, and ate half the dried meat they'd packed for her. The night was cold and clear, the stars so bright they looked like they'd been painted on. She lay on her back and stared up at them, trying not to think about what morning would bring. Sleep came in fragments. Every sound pulled her awake. Wind through the rocks, the horse shifting, the distant cry of something she couldn't name. When the sky finally started to lighten, she gave up and packed her bedroll. She was tightening the straps on the saddlebag when she heard the voice. "Don't move." Alara froze. The voice came from behind her, low and steady. She didn't turn around. "Drop the reins." She let them fall. "Step away from the horse." She took 3 steps forward, her hands loose at her sides. Her heart was hammering, but she kept her breathing even. Panic wouldn't help. Footsteps approached. She heard at least 2 people, maybe more. One of them circled around to face her. He was young, maybe 20, with dark eyes and a rifle slung across his back. He looked her over without expression. "You lost?" he asked. "No." "Then what are you doing here?" "I'm looking for Kael Varon." The young man's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. He glanced at someone over her shoulder, then back at her. "Why?" "I'm supposed to teach him English." For a moment no one spoke. Then the young man laughed, short and sharp. "You're the teacher?" "Yes." "They sent a woman." "They sent me." He shook his head slowly, like he couldn't believe it. "You know what he does to spies?" "I'm not a spy." "That's what a spy would say." Alara met his eyes. "If I were a spy, I wouldn't ride in alone and announce myself. I'd have come with a battalion and a plan. I don't have either. I have a book and a deal. That's it." The young man studied her for a long moment. Then he turned and said something in a language she didn't understand. Another voice answered from the rocks above. When he looked back at her, his face was hard. "We'll take you to him. But if you're lying, you won't leave the canyon alive." "I'm not lying. We'll see." They bound her wrists loosely and took the horse. She walked between them, flanked by 4 men who didn't speak to her or to each other. The path climbed steeply, winding through narrow passages between cliffs that rose like walls on either side. She couldn't see the sky. She couldn't see anything except rock and shadow and the backs of the men ahead of her. After what felt like hours, the passage opened into a wide basin surrounded by ridges. Smoke rose from cook fires scattered across the canyon floor. Shelters, some stone, some canvas, clustered in groups near the cliffs. People moved between them, working, talking, living. It looked like a town built in secret, hidden from the world. And in the center of it all, standing near the largest fire, was a man Alara knew had to be Kael Varon. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with long dark hair tied back and a face that looked like it had been carved out of the same stone as the canyon. He wore no uniform, just leather and worn cloth, but there was no mistaking who he was. The way people moved around him, the way the young man straightened when they approached, the way Kael's eyes locked onto her the moment she stepped into the open. The young man said something in their language. Kael answered without looking away from Alara. His voice was low, rough, like gravel underfoot. Then he spoke in English. "You the teacher?" Alara nodded. "They send you to trick me?" "No." "Why should I believe you?" "Because if I wanted to trick you, I'd lie better than this." Kael's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. He looked at her like he was deciding whether she was brave or just stupid. "You stay," he said finally. "You teach. You try to run, you die. You lie, you die. Understand?" "I understand." "Good." He turned to the young man and said something sharp. The young man nodded and grabbed Alara's arm, pulling her toward one of the shelters near the edge of the camp. Kael watched her go. She could feel his eyes on her back the whole way. They put her in a small stone shelter with a dirt floor and a gap in the roof that let in rain and smoke. There was a blanket, a clay bowl, and nothing else. The young man untied her wrists and stepped back. "You stay here. Don't leave unless someone comes for you." "When do I start teaching?" "When he's ready." The young man left. Alara sat down on the blanket and stared at the wall. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her knees and forced herself to breathe slowly. She was alive. That was more than she'd expected. But she was also alone, surrounded by people who didn't trust her, in a place she couldn't leave, working for a man who could kill her whenever he wanted. And somewhere outside, Kael Veron was deciding what to do with her. 3 days passed before anyone came for her. They brought her food, twice a day, barely enough, and water when she asked. No one spoke to her. No one looked at her. She was a ghost in the camp, ignored and invisible. On the third night, the young man returned. "He wants you." Alara stood. "Now?" "Yes." She followed him through the camp. The fires were burning low, and most people had gone inside. The young man led her to a shelter larger than the others, with hides stretched across the entrance. He pushed them aside and gestured for her to go in. Inside, Kael sat near a small fire, alone. He looked up when she entered. "Sit," he said. Alara sat across from him. The firelight made his face look sharper, older. She waited. Kael reached into a bag beside him and pulled out a piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully and held it up. It was covered in English writing, part of a treaty document, she guessed. "Read this," he said. Alara took the paper. It was a formal agreement, full of legal language and clauses. She started reading aloud, slowly, pronouncing each word clearly. Kael listened without moving. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Again," he said. She read it again. "What does it mean?" Alara hesitated. "It means the army wants you to stop raiding their supply lines. In exchange, they'll give you weapons, food, and territory rights." "Weapons?" "Yes." "What kind?" "It doesn't say." Kael's jaw tightened. He stared at the paper like it had betrayed him. Then he looked at her. "You read English good." "Well, you read English well." "What?" "The word is well, not good. When you're talking about doing something." Kael's eyes narrowed. "You correct me? You asked me to teach you. That's what teaching is." For a moment she thought he might throw her out, or worse, but instead he nodded slowly. "Say it again." "You read English well." "You read English well," Kael repeated. His accent was thick, but the structure was right. Alara felt something shift. He wasn't just listening, he was learning. "Good," she said. Kael almost smiled. Almost. Then he handed her another paper. "Teach me this." They worked through the night. Kael asked questions, blunt, sharp, relentless. He didn't care about grammar rules or proper structure. He wanted to understand what the words meant, what they were hiding, what the army was really offering, and Alara, despite herself, found that she was answering honestly. When the fire burned low, Kael finally leaned back. "You different," he said. "Different from what?" "From the others they send." "There were others?" "Two, both men, both liars." He looked at her steadily. "You lie?" Alara met his gaze. "Not about this." "About what then?" She didn't answer. Kael watched her for a moment longer, then nodded. "Go. Come back tomorrow." Alara stood. As she reached the entrance, Kael's voice stopped her. "Why you here?" She turned. "What do you mean?" "Why you come to the canyon? They force you?" Alara's throat tightened. "I was supposed to hang. They gave me a choice." Kael's expression didn't change. "What you do?" "I killed someone." Silence. Then Kael said, "He deserve it?" Alara's voice was quiet. "Yes." Kael nodded once. "Good." Alara left without another word. The lessons became routine. Every night Kael summoned her. Every night they sat by the fire and worked through documents, treaties, letters. He learned faster than she expected. His vocabulary grew. His sentences became clearer. And slowly, Alara began to see past the reputation. Kael Varon wasn't just a warlord. He was a leader trying to protect people who had no one else. He was sharp, calculating, and ruthless when he needed to be. But he wasn't cruel. He didn't waste words. He didn't lie. And he watched her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. One night, after they'd been working for nearly 2 weeks, Kael set down the paper he'd been reading and looked at her. "You not afraid of me?" It wasn't a question. Alara shrugged. "Should I be?" "Most people are. I'm not most people." Kael's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "No, you not." He leaned forward slightly. "Why you teach me true? You could lie. Make the words say something else." "I could," Alara admitted, "but I'm not interested in tricking you." "Why?" "Because I don't care about their war. I care about staying alive. And the only way I do that is if you trust me." Kael studied her. "You smart." "Thank you." "That not a compliment. Smart people dangerous. So are people who don't know what they're signing." Kael laughed, a short, rough sound that surprised them both. He shook his head. "You strange, teacher." "Alara." He looked at her. "My name is Alara, not teacher." Kael nodded slowly. "Alara." The way he said it, careful, deliberate, made something in her chest tighten. "Kael," she said. His eyes met hers. And for the first time, the space between them didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like something else entirely. "Shut, son." But the canyon didn't forgive softness. 2 days later, Alara was carrying water from the stream when she heard shouting. She turned and saw a group of men dragging someone into the center of the camp. The crowd gathered quickly, circling. Alara pushed closer, her heart pounding. The man on the ground was bloodied and bound. One of Kael's warriors stood over him, speaking rapidly in their language. The man on the ground spat something back, defiant. Kael appeared from the crowd. He looked down at the prisoner, his face unreadable. Then he pulled a knife from his belt and drove it into the man's chest. The crowd didn't react. It was over in seconds. Kael wiped the blade on his sleeve and walked away. Alara stood frozen, the bucket still in her hands. That night, Kael summoned her as usual. She came, but she didn't sit. "What's wrong?" Kael asked. "That man. This morning. He was a spy." "You killed him?" "Yes." Just like that, Kael's eyes hardened. "You think I should let him go? Let him tell the army where we are? How many we are? I didn't say that." "Then what you say?" Alara's voice was tight. "I'm saying I saw what you are." Kael stood. He was taller than her, broader, and the firelight made him look even more dangerous. But Alara didn't step back. "You know what I am," Kael said quietly. "You always know. You just forget." "I didn't forget." "Then why you look at me like I'm a monster now?" "Because you are." The words hung between them. Kael's jaw tightened. "Maybe, but you still here." "I don't have a choice." "You always have a choice, Alara." She stared at him. and she realized with a jolt that he was right. She could have run, could have refused, could have let them hang her, but she didn't. Sit, Kael said. Alara sat. They worked in silence for the rest of the night, but something had changed. The line between them had shifted, and neither of them knew where it would land. The next morning, Alara woke to find a woman standing in the doorway of her shelter. She was older than Alara, maybe 40, with gray streaking through her dark hair and a face that had seen too much sun. She didn't smile. She just looked at Alara with the same flat assessment everyone in the canyon seemed to have perfected. "Get up," the woman said. "You work now." Alara sat up slowly, pushing the blanket aside. "Work? You eat our food. You drink our water. You work." The woman turned and walked away without waiting for an answer. Alara pulled on her boots and followed. The woman led her to the far side of the camp, where a group of women were grinding corn on flat stones. They looked up when Alara approached, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. The older woman handed Alara a stone pestle and pointed to a pile of dried kernels. "Grind," she said. Alara knelt and started working. Her hands were soft from months in a cell, and within minutes her palms were raw. The corn was stubborn, the work slow and repetitive. Around her, the other women talked in their own language, their voices low and rhythmic. They didn't include her. They didn't acknowledge her. She was just another pair of hands. By midday, her back ached, and her arms felt like they were made of lead. One of the younger women brought water around in a clay jug. When she got to Alara, she poured only half as much as she'd given the others. Alara drank it anyway and went back to grinding. The older woman came back as the sun started to drop. She looked at Alara's work, then at her hands. The skin had blistered and torn in places, blood mixed with corn dust. "You slow," the woman said. "I'm learning." The woman's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Tomorrow, you faster." That became the pattern. Every morning, Alara worked, grinding corn, hauling water, scraping hides, whatever they told her to do. The women didn't speak to her, but they didn't send her away either. She learned by watching. She learned to keep her head down and her mouth shut. She learned that nothing in the canyon came easy. At night, she still went to Kael. They still worked through the documents, but now her hands shook when she held the papers, and sometimes she had to stop to flex her fingers before she could turn the page. Kael noticed. "You hurt," he said one night, nodding at her hands. "I'm fine." "Let me see." Alara hesitated, then held out her hands. The blisters had opened and scabbed over, then opened again. Kael frowned. "Who make you work like this?" "Everyone works. You said so yourself." "Not like this." "I'm not special." Kael's eyes flicked up to hers. "No, you not." But the next morning, when Alara went to the grinding stones, the older woman handed her a pair of worn leather gloves. "Use these," she said. Alara stared at them. "Where did you get these?" The woman didn't answer. She just walked away. Alara put the gloves on. They were too big, but they worked. And when she looked up, she saw Kael watching from across the camp. He didn't acknowledge her. He just turned and disappeared into the crowd. The days started to blur together. Work, lessons, sleep. Alara stopped counting. She stopped thinking about the prison, about the trial, about the rope. The canyon swallowed all of that. It demanded everything she had just to survive. But slowly, things shifted. The women started talking to her. Not much, just a word here and there. Corrections when she did something wrong. Instructions she didn't understand until someone showed her. One of the younger women, a girl named Sari, who couldn't have been older than 16, started sitting near her during meals. She didn't say anything, but her presence was something. And Kael kept teaching her too, in his own way. Not English, she was the one teaching him that, but the language of the canyon, the unspoken rules, the hierarchy, the things you didn't say out loud. One night, after a particularly brutal lesson where Kael had spent 2 hours dissecting a clause in the treaty that he was convinced was a trap, he leaned back and rubbed his eyes. "You tired?" Alara asked. "Always." "Then why do this? Why learn their language at all? You could just say no to the treaty." Kael looked at her like she'd asked why he breathed. "Because if I say no, they come with soldiers, they burn the canyon, they kill everyone. And if you say yes, maybe they kill us slower." Alara's throat tightened. "You don't trust them." No. Then why negotiate? Because fighting costs lives, and I'm tired of burying people. He said it flatly, without emotion, but Alara heard the weight behind the words. If I can make a deal that keeps my people alive, I make the deal. Even if I think they lie. What if they are lying? Kale's eyes met hers. Then I kill them first. Alara believed him. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Leading them. Making these choices. Kale was silent for a long time. Then he said, every day. The honesty of it hit her harder than she expected. She'd been thinking of him as untouchable, unbreakable, but he wasn't. He was just a man caring more than anyone should have to. Why do you do it then? She asked. Because no one else will. Alara didn't have an answer for that. Kale stood and walked to the entrance of the shelter. He paused, his back to her. You ask a lot of questions, Alara. Is that a problem? No. He glanced over his shoulder. But be careful. Questions make people think. Thinking makes them dangerous. Like me? Kale's mouth curved slightly. Yes. Like you. He left. Alara sat by the dying fire and stared at her hands. The blisters were healing, but new calluses were forming underneath. She barely recognized them anymore. She barely recognized herself. The first raid happened 3 weeks after Alara arrived. She woke to shouting and the sound of horses. The camp exploded into motion. Men grabbed weapons and ran toward the canyon entrance. Women pulled children inside the shelters. Alara stood in the doorway of her shelter, frozen, unsure what to do. Sari appeared beside her, breathless. Inside. Stay inside. What's happening? Soldiers, stay here. Sari ran. Alara stepped back into the shelter, but she couldn't just sit there. She moved to the gap in the wall and looked out. The canyon entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 horses side by side. Kyle's men had taken positions on the ridges above, their rifles aimed down. Below, a group of soldiers on horseback tried to push through. Gunfire cracked through the air, sharp and brutal. Alara flinched. One of the soldiers fell, then another. The rest pulled back, retreating into the passage. Kyle's men didn't chase them. They just held the line, waiting. It was over in minutes. When the camp settled, Alara came out. Bodies were being dragged away. Soldiers, not canyon people. The air smelled like smoke and blood. Kyle stood near the entrance, talking to one of his men. His face was hard, unreadable. Alara walked toward him without thinking. One of the warriors stepped in front of her, blocking her path. Move, she said. The man didn't budge. Kyle looked over. Let her through. The warrior stepped aside. Alara stopped a few feet from Kyle. Up close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the tight line of his jaw. You all right? She asked. Kyle's eyes narrowed. Why you care? I don't know, Alara said honestly. But I do. Kale stared at her. For a moment she thought he might tell her to leave, but instead he nodded once. I'm fine. How many? 3 dead? 5 injured? Your people or theirs? Theirs. Kale's voice was flat. This time. Alara looked past him toward the canyon entrance. They'll come back. Yes. What will you do? Kale turned to face her fully. What I always do. Fight, survive. Keep my people alive as long as I can. He paused. You scared? Yes. Good. You should be. But he didn't walk away, and neither did she. That night, Kyle didn't summon her for a lesson. Alara waited in her shelter, restless, unable to sleep. Finally, she got up and walked through the camp. Most of the fires had burned down to coals. The air was cold and still. She found Kyle sitting alone on a flat rock near the edge of the canyon, looking out at the desert below. The moonlight made everything look silver and strange. Alara climbed up and sat beside him. He didn't tell her to leave. You shouldn't be out here, Kyle said after a while. Neither should you. I'm always out here. Alara pulled her knees to her chest. Do you ever sleep? Sometimes. When? When I'm too tired to stay awake. Alara looked at him. In the moonlight, he looked older, worn down. You can't keep doing this forever. I know. Then what's the plan? Kale's mouth twisted. Survive long enough to see tomorrow. That's the only plan I got. They sat in silence. The desert stretched out below them, vast and empty. Alara wondered how many people had sat in this exact spot, looking at that same view, trying to figure out how to stay alive one more day. Why are you really here, Alara? Kyle asked quietly. You already know. They gave me a choice. No, why are you really here? You could have run the first night. You could have let them hang you. But you didn't, so why? Alara's chest tightened. She didn't want to answer, but something about the night, the silence, the way Kyle was looking at her, it pulled the truth out. Because I was tired of waiting to die, she said. In that cell, every day was the same, just waiting. I thought if I came here, at least I'd be doing something, even if it killed me. At least it would be my choice. Kale nodded slowly. You understand then? Understand what? Why I do this? He gestured toward the camp, the canyon, the people sleeping below. It's not about winning. It's about choosing how you fight. Alara looked at him, really looked at him, and she realized that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped seeing him as the wolf of the Red Canyon. She saw him as Kyle, just a man trying to protect the people he loved, knowing he'd probably fail. I understand, she said. Kale's eyes held hers. You shouldn't. Why not? Because people who understand me don't last long. Alara's breath caught. Is that a threat? No. Kale's voice was rough. It's a warning. But he didn't move away. And when Alara's hand brushed against his on the rock between them, he didn't pull back. They sat there until the sky started to lighten. Then Kale stood and offered her his hand. Alara took it, and he pulled her to her feet. Go sleep, he said. What about you? I'll sleep when I'm dead. Alara wanted to argue, but she knew it wouldn't matter, so she just nodded and walked back to her shelter. Behind her, Kale stayed on the rock, watching the sun rise over the canyon. The lessons changed after that night. They were sharper, more urgent. Kale pushed harder, asked more questions, demanded more. And Alara pushed back. She corrected him when he got things wrong. She argued when she thought he was missing something. She stopped being afraid of him. And Kyle noticed. You different now, he said one night. How? You don't look at me like I'm going to kill you. Are you? Not tonight. Alara smiled despite herself. Good to know. Kyle almost smiled back. Almost. You learning too, you know. Learning what? How to survive here. How to be one of us. Alara's chest tightened. I'm not one of you. Not yet. Kale's eyes were steady on hers. But you're getting close. Alara didn't know what to say to that. Part of her wanted to argue, to insist that she was still the same person who'd walked into the canyon a month ago. But she knew it wasn't true. She'd changed. The work, the people, the constant edge of danger, it had carved something new out of her, and Kyle had been there for all of it. Why do you care? She asked. Whether I fit in or not. Kale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because the people who don't fit in die, and I don't want you to die. Alara's breath caught. Why not? Kyle looked at her like the answer should be obvious. Because you're useful. It wasn't what she'd hoped he'd say, but it was honest, and somehow that mattered more. Thank you, she said quietly. Kyle nodded. Don't thank me yet. 2 days later, the soldiers came back. This time, they didn't just probe the entrance. They came in force, 20 men, maybe more, with rifles and determination. Kyle's warriors met them at the narrow pass, but the soldiers had better weapons, better training. The fighting was brutal. Alara stayed in her shelter like she'd been told, but she couldn't just sit there. She grabbed the water jug and ran toward the wounded. 3 men had been dragged back into the camp, bleeding and barely conscious. The older woman, her name was Mara, Alara had learned, was already working on one of them, packing a wound with cloth. Help me, Mara snapped. Alara dropped to her knees beside another man. His shoulder was torn open, blood pouring out faster than she could stop it. She pressed her hands against the wound, feeling the heat and the pulse of it. Hold it, Mara said. Don't let go. Alara held on. Her hands were slick with blood, her arms shaking. The man's eyes were wide and unfocused. He said something in his language, desperate and choked. What's he saying? Alara asked. He's asking if he's going to die. Mara didn't look up. Tell him no. I don't speak. Tell him anyway. Alara leaned closer, her voice shaking. You're not going to die, you hear me? You're not. The man's eyes found hers. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. He nodded, just barely. Alara kept pressure on the wound until Mara finished with the first man and came over. Together, they packed the shoulder and tied it off. The bleeding slowed. The man's breathing evened out. Good, Mara said. You learn fast. Alara's hands were shaking so hard she could barely stand, but she nodded. By the time the fighting stopped, 4 soldiers were dead, and 2 of Kael's men were gone. The camp was quiet in the way that comes after violence, heavy, exhausted, grieving. Alara found Kael near the entrance, talking to his warriors. His face was streaked with dirt and blood, his jaw tight. When he saw her, something in his expression shifted. You should be inside, he said. I was helping. You shouldn't have been. People were dying. People always dying, Alara. That's what happens here. Alara's voice rose. So I'm just supposed to sit there and do nothing? Yes? Why? Because I don't want you to get killed doing something stupid. The words hit her harder than they should have. She stared at him, her chest tight. You don't get to decide that. Kael's eyes flashed. Yes, I do. You here because I let you stay. You alive because I keep you safe. You don't get to throw that away. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm trying to help. You help by teaching, that's all. Alara stepped closer, her voice low and fierce. You don't own me, Kael. Kael's jaw clenched. For a moment she thought he might yell, but instead his voice went quiet. No, I don't. He looked at her like he was trying to memorize her face. But if you die, I can't bring you back. So don't make me watch it happen. Alara's anger drained away. She saw it then, the fear underneath the control. He wasn't angry because she'd disobeyed. He was angry because she'd scared him. I'll be careful, she said quietly. Kael nodded once, then turned and walked away. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She kept seeing the wounded man's eyes, the blood on her hands, the way Kael had looked at her. She got up and walked through the camp again, restless. She found Sari sitting by one of the fires, alone. The girl looked up when Alara approached. Can't sleep? Sari asked. Her English was broken but clear. No. Sari gestured to the space beside her. Alara sat. You scared today, Sari said. Yes. But you help anyway. Alara nodded. Sari looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, Kael care about you? Alara's heart skipped. What? He care? Everyone see it. I don't think he never care about the others, the ones before you. They just tools. But you different. Sari's eyes were serious. Be careful, Alara. When Kael care about something, he fight for it. And fighting here, she trailed off. Fighting here always cost. Alara didn't know what to say. Sari stood and walked away, leaving her alone by the fire. The next few days were tense. The soldiers didn't come back, but everyone knew they would. Kael doubled the guards, rationed supplies, prepared for a siege. And through it all, he kept working with Alara. But something had shifted between them. The lessons were quieter now, more careful, like they were both afraid to say the wrong thing. One night, Kael set down the treaty document he'd been reading and looked at her. You know what this says, don't you? Alara nodded. Yes. Tell me true, what you think? Alara hesitated. I think it's a trap. Kael's eyes sharpened. Why? Because the weapons they're offering, there's no specification, no quantity, no quality, no timeline. It's deliberately vague. They could send you broken rifles and call it fulfilled. And the territory rights? Same thing. It says they'll recognize your claim, but it doesn't say they'll stop trying to take it back. It's full of loopholes. Kael leaned back, his expression dark. So they lie, or they're planning to. Then why I waste time learning this? Because if you know how they're lying, you can plan for it. You can negotiate better terms or walk away before they corner you. Kael studied her. You smart, Alara. Too smart for your own good. Is that a problem? For them? Yes. He paused. For me? No. Alara's pulse quickened. Why not? Because I trust you. The words hung in the air between them. Alara's throat tightened. You shouldn't, she said quietly. Why not? Because I'm here to save myself, not you. Kael's eyes didn't waver. I know, that's why I trust you. You honest about what you want. Alara didn't have an answer for that. Kael stood and walked to the entrance. He paused, his back to her. Tomorrow we meet with the colonel. He's coming to the canyon to talk terms. Alara's stomach dropped. Here? Yes. Neutral ground, he says. He wants me to show good faith. Kael's voice was hard. You be there, you translate. Kael, if this is a trap, then we deal with it. He glanced over his shoulder. Get some sleep, Alara. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. He left. Alara sat alone in the shelter, her mind racing. The colonel was coming, the man who'd sent her here, who'd given her the choice between the rope and the canyon, the man who'd looked at her like she was already dead. And now she was going to stand beside Kael and translate the words that might get them all killed. She pressed her hands to her face and tried to breathe. Tomorrow was coming, whether she was ready or not. The colonel arrived at noon with 10 soldiers and a translator Alara had never seen before. They rode into the canyon slowly, hands visible, weapons holstered. Kael's warriors lined the ridges above, rifles ready. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Alara stood beside Kael near the largest fire, her stomach twisted into just knots. She hadn't seen the colonel since the night he'd offered her the deal, and now, watching him dismount and straighten his uniform, she felt the weight of everything that had happened since. The colonel's eyes found her immediately. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look anything, just that same cold assessment. Miss Quinn, he said, you're still alive. I'm impressed. Alara didn't answer. Kael stepped forward. You come to talk or to look? The colonel's attention shifted. To talk, Mr. Varen, just as we agreed. Then talk. The colonel gestured to his translator, a thin man with nervous hands. But before the man could speak, the colonel held up a hand. Actually, I'd prefer if Miss Quinn translated. Since she's been working with you, she'll understand the context better. Kael's jaw tightened. He looked at Alara. She nodded. Fine, Kael said. They sat in a rough circle near the fire. Kael, the colonel, Alara, and 2 of Kael's senior warriors. The colonel's soldiers stayed back, but Alara could feel their eyes on her, watching, waiting. The colonel pulled out a leather folder and opened it. Inside were fresh copies of the treaty documents, cleaner and more official than the ones Alara had been working from. Let's start simple, the colonel said. We want peace. You want security. This agreement gives us both, Alara translated. Kael's expression didn't change. What you really want? Kael asked. Alara hesitated, then translated it exactly as he'd said it. The colonel's mouth twitched. Direct. I appreciate that. He leaned forward slightly. We want the raids to stop. We want safe passage through this territory, and we want assurance that you won't align with any hostile forces. And what I get? Recognition of your territorial claim, weapons and supplies, protection from external threats. Kael listened to Alara's translation, then shook his head. Not enough. The colonel's eyes narrowed. What more do you want? Specifics. You say weapons. What kind? How many? You say supplies, food, medicine, tools. You say protection. From who? Your own soldiers? Alara translated carefully, watching the colonel's face. He didn't like being questioned. We'll provide standard military rifles, the colonel said. 50 units to start. Ammunition, medical supplies, and grain shipments every 2 months. As for protection, we'll ensure no other military forces enter your territory without cause. Alara translated. Kael was quiet for a long moment. Show me the rifles, he said. The colonel blinked. I don't have them here. Then how I know they work? You'll have to trust. I don't trust you. Kael's voice was flat. You bring me proof, or we don't sign anything. The colonel's jaw tightened. He looked at Alara like this was somehow her fault. Miss Quinn, Perhaps you could explain to Mr. Veron that these negotiations require a degree of good faith. Alara's voice was steady. He understands. He just doesn't believe you. The colonel's eyes went cold. I see. And what do you believe, Miss Quinn? Alara's heart pounded. This was the moment. She could lie, smooth things over, try to make the deal work. Or she could tell the truth. She looked at Kael. He was watching her, waiting. I believe he's right to be suspicious, Alara said quietly. The colonel leaned back. Is that so? The treaty language is vague. The terms are open to interpretation. If I were him, I wouldn't sign it either. The colonel's expression hardened. You were sent here to facilitate this negotiation, not undermine it. I was sent here to teach him English. I did that. What he does with it is his choice. The colonel stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned back to Kael. Fine. I'll have the rifles brought here for inspection, but I need something from you in return. What? A gesture of good faith. Release the prisoners you took from our last patrol. Kael's eyes narrowed. What prisoners? Don't play games, Varen. We know you have them. I don't take prisoners. I kill soldiers or I let them run. That's it. The colonel's voice went sharp. We have reports. Your reports are wrong. Kael stood abruptly. We're done here. The colonel stood too. Sit down. We're not finished. Yes, we are. You come here with lies and bad deals. You waste my time. Kael looked at Alara. Tell him to leave. Alara translated. The colonel's face went red. You're making a mistake, Varen. Kael didn't answer. He just turned and walked away. His warriors followed. The colonel looked at Alara. This is your fault. No, Alara said quietly. This is yours. You should have come with an honest offer. I did. No, you came with a trap, and he saw it. The colonel stepped closer, his voice dropping. You think you're safe here? You think he won't turn on you the second you're no longer useful? Alara met his eyes. Maybe, but at least he's honest about it. The colonel's mouth twisted. You've gone native, Miss Quinn. That's unfortunate. He turned and walked back to his horse. His soldiers mounted up. Before he left, he looked back at Alara one more time. When this falls apart, don't come crying to us. I won't. The colonel and his men rode out of the canyon. Alara stood by the fire, her hands shaking. Around her, the camp slowly came back to life. People moved, talked, returned to work. But Alara couldn't move. Kael appeared beside her. You all right? Alara nodded, not trusting her voice. You did good, Kael said quietly. You tell him the truth. I probably just made everything worse. No, you just made it clear. Kael paused. He'll come back. With soldiers. More than before. I know. You scared? Yes. Kael's hand brushed hers, brief and deliberate. Good. Stay scared, keeps you alive. He walked away. Alara stood alone by the fire, watching the canyon entrance. She'd made her choice. There was no going back now. That night, the camp was restless. Everyone knew what was coming. The warriors checked their weapons, stockpiled ammunition, reinforced the defenses. The women packed food and medicine, prepared hiding places for the children. It felt like the whole canyon was holding its breath. Alara couldn't sleep. She lay in her shelter, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of preparation outside. Finally, she gave up and walked out into the night. Kael was where she'd expected him to be, on the rock overlooking the desert, alone. She climbed up and sat beside him without asking. You should be resting, Kael said. So should you. I told you, I don't sleep. Alara looked at him. In the moonlight, he looked exhausted. When did you last eat? I don't remember. Kael, I'm fine, Alara. No, you're not. Kael's jaw tightened. What you want me to say? That I'm tired? That I don't know if we can win this? That I'm watching everything I built fall apart and there's nothing I can do to stop it? He looked at her, his eyes fierce. Is that what you want to hear? Alara's throat tightened. I want you to stop pretending you're not human. I can't afford to be human, not now. Yes, you can. You just won't. Kael looked away. If I stop, everything falls apart. The people here, they need me to be strong. If they see me break, they'll break too. You don't have to carry it alone. Yes, I do. Alara's chest ached. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but she understood. She'd seen the way people looked at him, the way they depended on him. He was the center that held everything together. If he fell, they all did. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Kael's eyes softened slightly. For what? For not being able to help more. You help plenty. He paused. More than you should. What does that mean? It means you care too much. About people who aren't your people. About fights that aren't your fight. Maybe they are now. Kael turned to look at her fully. You really believe that? Alara's heart pounded. I don't know, but I know I don't want to leave. Kael's expression shifted. Something raw and unguarded flickered across his face before he locked it down again. You don't mean that? Yes, I do. Alara. I know what I'm saying, Kael. I know what it means. Kael's voice went rough. You don't belong here. Maybe not. But I don't belong anywhere else either. They stared at each other. The space between them felt charged, dangerous. Alara's breath caught. Kael reached out slowly, his hand hovering near her face. I shouldn't. I know. This is a mistake. I know. But he didn't pull back. And when his fingers finally touched her cheek, gentle and careful, Alara closed her eyes. I can't protect you if this happens, Kael said quietly. I'm not asking you to. You should. Alara opened her eyes. I don't want protection. I want... She didn't finish. Kael kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was desperate and fierce and full of everything they'd been holding back. Alara's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. Kael's arm wrapped around her waist, holding her like she might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kael rested his forehead against hers. This is going to get us both killed, he said. Probably. You don't care? Not right now. Kael's laugh was rough and broken. You're insane. So are you. He kissed her again, softer this time. Then he pulled back and stood, offering her his hand. Alara took it. They walked back to the camp together, their fingers intertwined. At the entrance to Alara's shelter, Kael stopped. I can't stay, he said. I know. But I want to. Alara's chest tightened. Then stay. Kael looked at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. Not yet. Not until I know we're safe. We're never going to be safe. Then not until I know we'll survive the next few days. He squeezed her hand. Sleep, Alara. I'll see you in the morning. He let go and walked away. Alara watched him disappear into the shadows, her heart pounding. She went inside and lay down, but sleep was impossible. Her mind kept replaying the feel of Kael's hands, the taste of his mouth, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. She'd crossed a line. They both had. And there was no going back. The next morning, Alara woke to chaos. Shouts echoed through the camp. People ran in every direction. Alara stumbled outside and grabbed Sari as she ran past. What's happening? Sari's face was pale. Scouts saw them. Soldiers. Coming from the east. A lot of them. Alara's stomach dropped. How many? 50. Maybe more. Alara let go and ran toward the center of the camp. Kael was already there, surrounded by his warriors, giving orders in rapid-fire bursts. He looked up when Alara approached. Get inside, he said. This isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't. Kael's eyes flashed. Alara, I'm not hiding while you go out there and get killed. You don't have a weapon. You don't have training. You'll just get in the way. Then give me something to do that won't. Kael stared at her. Then he turned to Mara, who was standing nearby. Take her to the wounded station. If we bring anyone back, she helps. Mara nodded. Come on. Alara wanted to argue, but she knew Kael was right. She'd be useless in a fight. So she followed Mara to a shelter near the back of the camp where supplies were already laid out. Cloth, water, knives for cutting bandages. You remember what I showed you? Mara asked. Yes. Good, because today you're going to need it. The warriors left in waves. First the scouts, then the main group, then the rear guard. Kael went with the main group, his rifle slung across his back. He didn't look back at Alara. He couldn't afford to. The waiting was worse than anything Alara had experienced. She sat in the shelter with Mara and two other women, listening to the distant sounds of gunfire. Every crack made her flinch. Every shout made her heart race. The first wounded came back after an hour. 3 men, all bleeding, all barely conscious. Alara and Mara worked side by side, packing wounds, tying off bleeding, doing whatever they could to keep them alive. The second wave came 30 minutes later. More men, worse injuries. Alara's hands were shaking, her arms covered in blood. One of the men, a young warrior she'd seen around the camp, grabbed her wrist as she worked on his leg. "Kyle?" he gasped. "He's still out there," Alara said. The man nodded and let go, his eyes closing. Alara kept working. The gunfire went on for hours. By the time it finally stopped, Alara's whole body was numb. She sat back on her heels, staring at her blood-covered hands, trying to remember how to breathe. Mara touched her shoulder. "You did good." Alara couldn't answer. Footsteps outside. Alara's head snapped up. Kyle appeared in the doorway, alive but covered in dust and blood. His eyes found hers immediately. "You all right?" he asked. Alara nodded, not trusting her voice. Kyle's gaze swept the shelter, taking in the wounded, the supplies, the exhaustion on everyone's faces. Then he looked back at Alara. "We held them off. They retreated." "For how long?" "I don't know, but we hurt them. Bad." He paused. "We lost 6. Alara's chest tightened. 6 people. Gone. Just like that. "I need to talk to you," Kyle said. "Outside." Alara stood and followed him out. They walked away from the camp into the rocks where no one could hear them. "What is it?" Alara asked. Kyle's jaw was tight. "We can't keep doing this. Every time they come, we lose people. Eventually, we'll run out." "So what do you want to do?" "I want to make a deal, a real one. But I don't trust the colonel. I think he's planning something." Alara's stomach twisted. "What kind of something?" "I don't know, but the way he looked at you yesterday, he knows you're with us now, and I think he's going to use that." "How?" Kyle's eyes met hers. "I think he's going to try to take you back, either to punish you or to get to me. Maybe both." Alara's breath caught. "You think he'd come back just for me?" "No, I think he'll come back to finish this. And you're just a bonus." Alara's mind raced. "Then we leave, take everyone and go deeper into the mountains." "There's nowhere left to go. We're already at the edge of survivable territory." "Then what?" Kyle was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I think we need to force his hand, make him commit to the deal or walk away for good." "How?" "By giving him something he wants. Information, maybe. Or a hostage." Alara's blood ran cold. "You're not serious." "I'm always serious. Is so?" "KL, if you hand someone over to him, not someone, me." Alara's heart stopped. "No." "Listen to me. No, absolutely not." "Alara, if I go to him under a flag of truce, offer to negotiate face to face, he'll kill you." "Maybe. But maybe he'll actually deal. And if I can get him to commit to real terms, we have a chance." Alara's hands were shaking. "This is suicide. This is the only option we have left. No, there has to be another way." Kale's voice gentled. "If there was, I'd take it. But there isn't. And I can't watch my people die one by one while I do nothing." Alara's eyes burned. "You're not doing nothing. You're fighting. Fighting's not enough anymore. I need to end this." "Not like this." Kale reached out and cupped her face in his hands. "Listen to me. If I don't come back, you leave. You take whatever you can carry and you run. Don't stay here. Don't try to fight for them. Just go." "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are." Kale. "Promise me, Alara." Alara's throat was so tight she could barely speak. "I can't." "Promise me." She stared at him, her chest breaking. "I promise." Kale pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For dragging you into this. For making you care." "You didn't make me do anything. I chose this." Kale's arms tightened around her. "I know, that's what scares me." They stood like that for a long time. Then Kale pulled back. "I'm leaving tomorrow morning, alone. I'll ride to the colonel's camp and offer to talk. And if it's a trap, then you keep your promise. Alara wanted to scream, to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but she knew it wouldn't matter. Kyle had made his decision. "Let me come with you," she said quietly. "No." "I can translate. I can No, Alara. You stay here where it's safe." "Nowhere is safe." "Safer than with me." Alara's voice broke. "I don't care." Kale's eyes softened. "I know, but I do." He kissed her, slow and deep, like he was trying to memorize the feel of her. When he pulled back, his eyes were fierce. "If I don't come back, you survive. You hear me? You survive." Alara nodded, tears streaming down her face. Kyle let go and walked away. That night, Alara lay in her shelter and stared at the ceiling. She couldn't stop thinking about Kyle riding into the colonel's camp alone, unarmed, trusting a man who'd already proven he couldn't be trusted. It was suicide, and there was nothing she could do to stop it, but maybe there was something she could do to help. Alara sat up slowly, her mind racing. The treaty documents, the ones the colonel had brought. They were still in Kyle's shelter. She'd seen them there earlier. If she could read them, really read them, maybe she could find something, some clause, some loophole, some proof that the colonel was lying. It was a long shot, but it was all she had. Alara slipped out of her shelter and made her way across the camp. Most people were asleep. The fires had burned down to embers. She reached Kyle's shelter and paused, listening. No sound. She pushed the hide aside and went in. The documents were on the table where Kyle had left them. Alara lit a small lantern and started reading. At first, everything looked normal. Standard treaty language, the same clauses she'd already seen. But then she found something buried in the middle of the document, a section about weapons delivery. It said the rifles would be provided within 30 days of the agreement being signed. But there was a subsection written in smaller text that specified the rifles would be inspected and approved by military ordnance before transfer. Alara's stomach dropped. Inspected and approved. That meant the army controlled which weapons got delivered. They could send broken rifles, faulty ammunition, anything they wanted, and the treaty would still technically be fulfilled. But there was more. Another clause, near the end, outlined the conditions for nullifying the agreement. It said that if Kyle or his people engaged in hostile action against army personnel or assets, the treaty would be void. Hostile action, defined broadly enough to include anything: a raid, a fight, even self-defense. Alara's hand shook as she read the final section. It detailed the protocol for treaty enforcement, and buried in the legal language was a single sentence that made her blood run cold. In the event of treaty violation, all parties residing within the designated territory shall be subject to immediate military action. It was a massacre clause, hidden in legal jargon. If Kyle signed this and then did anything the army considered hostile, anything at all, they'd have legal justification to wipe out the entire canyon. The treaty wasn't a deal. It was a death sentence. Alara's breath came in short gasps. She had to tell Kyle. Had to stop him from going to the colonel. Had to... The hide moved behind her. Alara spun around. Kyle stood in the entrance, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing here?" he asked quietly. Alara held up the documents. "Reading this. And you need to see what I found." Kyle stepped inside and closed the hide behind him. Alara showed him the clauses, translating each one carefully, explaining what they meant. Kale's face went hard as stone. "They plan to kill us," he said flatly. "Yes. The whole treaty is designed to trap you. You sign it, they control the weapons, and the second you defend yourself, they call it a violation and attack." Kyle's jaw clenched. "And if I don't sign?" "They attack anyway, but at least you're not giving them legal cover." Kale looked at the documents for a long moment. Then he picked them up and threw them into the fire. They curled and blackened, the edges glowing bright before turning to ash. "So we fight," Kyle said. "We can't win." "I know." Alara's chest ached. "Then what do we do?" Kyle turned to her, his eyes fierce. "We make them pay for every inch. We make it so expensive they think twice before trying again. And we survive long enough to find another way." "What other way?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." He paused. "You shouldn't have come here tonight." "I had to." "Why?" "Because I can't let you die for a lie." Kael's expression softened. He crossed the space between them and pulled her into his arms. Alara buried her face in his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I'm not going to the colonel tomorrow," Kael said quietly. "Good. But he's going to come here, soon. And when he does, it's going to be bad." Alara nodded against his chest. "You need to be ready to run," Kael said. "I'm not running. Alara, I'm staying. Whatever happens, I'm staying." Kael pulled back and looked at her. "You're sure?" "Yes." Kael's eyes held hers. Then he kissed her, hard and desperate. And this time, when he pulled her toward the blankets in the corner, Alara didn't resist. They had tonight. Maybe that was all they'd ever have. But it was enough. Morning came too fast. Alara woke wrapped in Kael's arms, his breath warm against her neck. For a moment, she let herself believe everything was normal, that they were safe, that the world outside didn't exist. Then Kael stirred, and reality crashed back. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder and pulled away, reaching for his clothes. Alara watched him dress, memorizing every movement. "They'll know," she said quietly. Kael glanced at her. "Know what?" "About us." "Everyone will know. Let them." He buckled his belt and turned to face her. "I'm done hiding." Alara's chest tightened. "Kael, I don't care what they think. Any of them." He crossed back to her and knelt beside the blankets. "You're mine. I'm yours. That's all that matters." Alara touched his face. "That's going to make you weak, in their eyes." "Then I'm weak." Kael caught her hand and pressed it to his chest. "I'd rather be weak with you than strong alone." Alara's throat burned. She pulled him down and kissed him, trying to pour everything she couldn't say into it. When they broke apart, Kael rested his forehead against hers. "We should go," he said, "before people start asking questions." "Too late for that." Kael smiled slightly. "Probably." They left the shelter together. The sun was just rising, painting the canyon in shades of gold and red. A few early risers were already moving through the camp, starting fires, preparing food. They looked up when Kael and Alara emerged, and Alara saw the moment understanding dawned on their faces. No one said anything, but they didn't have to. Mara was waiting near Alara's shelter. She looked at them both, her expression unreadable. "So," she said, "that happened." Kael's voice was steady. "Yes." Mara studied them for a long moment. Then she nodded. "About time." Alara blinked. "What?" "Everyone's been watching you two dance around each other for weeks. It was getting painful." Mara turned to Kael. "You need to eat, and you need to call a council meeting." "Why?" "Because people are scared. They need to know what you're planning." Kael's jaw tightened. "I'm planning to keep them alive." "Then tell them that." Kael looked at Alara. She nodded. "Fine," Kael said. "Gather everyone. 1 hour." Mara left. Kael turned to Alara. "You should be there," he said. "Are you sure?" "Yes, they need to see we're together on this." Alara's heart raced. "Together on what, exactly?" Kael's eyes were dark. "Whatever comes next." The council gathered in the center of the camp. Everyone came. Warriors, women, elders, even the children. They formed a loose circle around Kael, their faces tense and waiting. Kael stood in the middle, Alara beside him. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at them, one by one, letting the silence build. Then he started talking. In his own language first, his voice carrying across the canyon. Alara caught pieces of it, words she'd learned, phrases she recognized. But mostly she just watched the faces of the people listening. Some nodded, some frowned, some looked afraid. When Kael finished, he switched to English and looked directly at Alara. "Tell them what you found. In the treaty." Alara's stomach twisted, but she stepped forward. "The army's offer is a trap," she said. Kael translated as she spoke. "The weapons they promised, they control which ones you get. They can send you broken rifles and still call the treaty fulfilled. And there's a clause that says if you defend yourselves, they can void the agreement and attack. They're not trying to make peace. They're trying to give themselves legal cover for a massacre." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Kael raised a hand and they quieted. "So we don't sign," Kael said. "We don't negotiate. We prepare for war. One of the older warriors stood. We can't win a war against them. I know. Then what are we doing? Kyle's voice was hard. We're making them bleed for every foot of ground. We're making it so expensive they think twice before coming back. And we're buying time to find another way. What other way? Another voice called. I don't know yet, but I'll find it. The crowd was restless now. People talked over each other, voices rising. Alara could feel the fear spreading like wildfire. Then Sari stood. She was small, barely visible in the crowd, but her voice cut through the noise. Kael's kept us alive this long. I trust him. Silence fell. Sari looked around. We all trust him. That's why we're still here. So if he says fight, we fight. And if he says wait, we wait. But we do it together. Slowly, others started nodding. The older warrior who'd spoken first stood again. She's right. We follow you, Kael, whatever you decide. Kael's expression didn't change, but Alara saw something shift in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or just exhaustion. Then we prepare, Kael said. Check your weapons. Ration supplies. Get the children ready to move if we need to evacuate. And watch the canyon entrance. The colonel's coming. I don't know when, but he's coming. The crowd dispersed slowly. Alara stayed beside Kael as people filed past. Some touched his shoulder as they went. Others nodded to Alara. A few looked at her with something like respect. When everyone was gone, Kael let out a long breath. That could have gone worse, Alara said. It's not over yet. I know. Kael turned to her. You did good, speaking up like that. I just told them the truth. That's more than most people do. He paused. They trust you now. You know that, right? Alara looked around at the camp, the shelters, the fires, the people moving through their daily routines. I don't want to let them down. You won't. How do you know? Kael's eyes held hers. Because you're not the kind of person who runs when things get hard. Alara's chest ached. Neither are you. No, but I'm the kind of person who gets people killed. Kael, it's true. Every decision I make, people die. And I have to live with that. His voice went quiet. I don't want you to be one of them. Alara stepped closer. Then don't make me. Keep me alive. Keep yourself alive. And we'll figure out the rest. Kael pulled her against him, his arms tight around her. I'm trying. I know. They stood like that for a long moment. Then Kael pulled back. I need to check the defenses. Come with me. They spent the rest of the day walking the canyon perimeter, inspecting fortifications, talking to warriors. Kael pointed out weaknesses, explained strategy, showed Alara how the canyon's natural defenses worked. She listened, absorbing everything, trying to understand the logic of survival. By the time the sun started to set, Alara's legs ached and her head was spinning with information. But she felt like she understood the canyon better, the way it breathed, the way it protected the people inside it. It's beautiful, she said, looking out at the red stone glowing in the evening light. Kael followed her gaze. It's a prison. No, it's a fortress. Same thing. Alara looked at him. You really see it that way? I see it for what it is. A place where we're safe until we're not. Kael's voice was flat. I've been here 10 years, Alara. I've watched it save people and I've watched it trap them. It's both. Is that why you're willing to negotiate? To find a way out? I'm willing to negotiate because staying here forever means dying here. And I want my people to have more than that. What about you? What do you want? Kael looked at her, and for a moment his guard dropped completely. I want to wake up one morning and not have to count who's still alive. I want to make a decision that doesn't cost someone their life. I want... He stopped. What? I want to be with you somewhere that isn't falling apart. Alara's breath caught. Kael, I know, it's stupid. We're in the middle of a war and I'm thinking about impossible things. It's not stupid. Yes, it is. Because even if we survive this, there's nowhere for us to go. You're a convicted killer. I'm wanted in 3 territories. We can't just ride off into the sunset. Maybe not. But we can try. Kael's laugh was rough. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point? Kael pulled her close and kissed her, hard and desperate. When he pulled back, his eyes were fierce. If we get out of this alive, I'm going to find us that somewhere. I don't care how impossible it is. Promise? Promise. They walked back to the camp as the stars came out. Alara's hand was in Kael's, their fingers intertwined. She could feel eyes on them, but she didn't care. Let people see. Let them know. She'd chosen this, chosen him. And whatever happened next, she wasn't going to regret it. That night, Alara dreamed of fire. She woke gasping, Kael's arms already around her. You're all right, just a dream. Alara's heart was pounding. It felt real. I know. Do you dream? Kael was quiet for a moment. Sometimes. About what? Losing. Alara turned to face him in the darkness. What does losing look like? Everyone dead, the canyon burned. You... He stopped. Me what? Kael's voice was rough. You looking at me like I failed you. Alara's throat tightened. That won't happen. You don't know that. Neither do you. Kael pulled her closer. They lay in silence, listening to the night sounds of the canyon. Alara traced patterns on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Tell me something true, she said quietly. What do you mean? Something you've never told anyone else. Kael was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, I'm tired of being the wolf. Alara went still. Everyone looks at me and sees this thing they built in their heads. The warlord, the killer, the one who never breaks. And I play the part because that's what they need. But I'm tired of it. His voice dropped. Sometimes I want to just be Kael, just a man, not a symbol. Alara's eyes burned. You are just a man. Not to them. Then be just a man to me. Kael's arms tightened around her. I'm trying. I know. They fell asleep tangled together, holding on like the world was trying to tear them apart. The colonel came 3 days later. The scouts saw them at dawn. A full battalion, heavily armed, moving toward the canyon in formation. Kael called everyone to positions. The warriors took the ridges. The women and children moved to the back caves. Alara stood with Mara at the medical station, her hands already shaking. This is it, Mara said quietly. Yes. You ready? Alara looked at her blood-stained hands from the last attack. No, but I'll do it anyway, Mara nodded. Good. The battalion stopped just outside the canyon entrance. The colonel rode forward alone, a white flag raised. Kael appeared on the ridge above, his rifle visible but lowered. I want to talk, the colonel called. Then talk, Kael shouted back. Face to face, just you and me. Why should I trust you? Because if I wanted you dead, we'd already be shooting. Kael looked down at Alara. She shook her head. Don't go. Don't trust him. But Kael was already climbing down. Stay in position, he told his warriors. If anything happens, you know what to do. He walked out into the open space between the canyon and the battalion. The colonel dismounted and met him halfway. They stood facing each other, two men who'd been circling each other for months. Alara couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see the colonel's body language. Stiff, angry, and Kael's controlled but tense. The conversation lasted maybe 5 minutes. Then the colonel said something that made Kael's whole body go rigid. The colonel turned and walked back to his horse. Kael stood alone in the open space, not moving. Then the colonel stopped, turned back, and pulled his pistol. Everything happened at once. Kael dove to the side. The shot missed. The colonel's soldiers raised their rifles. Kael's warriors opened fire from the ridges. And Alara ran. She didn't think. She just grabbed the rifle one of the wounded warriors had left behind and sprinted toward the canyon entrance. Behind her, Mara shouted something, but Alara didn't stop. The battlefield was chaos. Soldiers poured into the canyon. Kael's warriors held the high ground, picking them off one by one. But there were too many. They kept coming. Alara saw Kael fighting hand-to-hand with 2 soldiers. She raised the rifle, her hand shaking so badly she could barely hold it steady. She'd never fired a gun before. One of the soldiers raised his weapon, aiming at Kael's back. Alara pulled the trigger. The recoil knocked her backward. Her ears rang. The soldier dropped. Kael spun around, his eyes finding hers across the battlefield. For a moment, everything else disappeared. Then another soldier charged at Alara. She didn't have time to reload. She swung the rifle like a club, catching him in the side. He went down. She scrambled back, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Kale was beside her in seconds, his knife flashing. The soldier didn't get up. "What the hell are you doing here?" Kale shouted over the gunfire. "Saving you! I told you to stay back! And I told you I'm not hiding!" Kyle grabbed her arm and pulled her behind a boulder. Bullets ricocheted off the stone. He looked at her, his face wild. "You could have died." "So could you. That's different." "No, it's not." Kale kissed her, hard and fast. Then he shoved the rifle back into her hands. "Stay close, and for the love of everything, don't get killed." They fought their way back toward the canyon entrance. Alara's whole body was shaking, adrenaline and terror making everything sharp and too bright. She fired when Kyle told her to, moved when he moved, tried not to think about the bodies dropping around them. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes. Slowly, impossibly, Kyle's people started to gain ground. The soldiers were trained, but they didn't know the canyon. They didn't know the hidden positions, the sniper nests, the kill zones Kale had spent years perfecting. They were fighting on his terms now. The colonel's men started to retreat. They pulled back, regrouping outside the canyon entrance. Kyle's warriors held their positions, weapons ready. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then the colonel appeared at the entrance again, this time with a prisoner. Alara's blood ran cold. It was Sari. The girl's hands were bound, her face bruised. The colonel held a gun to her head. "Varon!" he shouted. "Come out or she dies." Kael's face went white. "No." "You have 10 seconds." Kael started forward. Alara grabbed his arm. "It's a trap. He'll kill you both." "I can't let her die. And I can't let you walk into that." Kael's eyes were wild. "What do you want me to do, Alara? Let him shoot a child?" "No. I want you to trust me." "What?" Alara didn't let him finish. She stepped out from behind the boulder, hands raised, rifle on the ground. "Wait!" she shouted. The colonel's eyes locked onto her. "Miss Quinn, I was hoping you'd show yourself." "Let the girl go. Take me instead." Kale grabbed her. "No, absolutely not." Alara wrenched free. "It's me he wants. You said so yourself." "Alara, trust me." She walked forward, hands still raised. The colonel smiled. "That's far enough." Alara stopped 20 feet away. "Let her go. I'll come willingly. And why would I do that? Because killing a child makes you a monster, but taking me makes you a tactician, and you're smarter than that." The colonel's smile widened. "You always were clever, Miss Quinn, too clever for your own good. Then prove you're just as smart. Make the trade." The colonel considered for a long moment. Then he shoved Sari forward. The girl stumbled and ran toward Kael's men. One of the warriors caught her. "Come here, Miss Quinn." Alara walked forward. Every step felt like walking toward a cliff edge. Behind her, she could hear Kael shouting, but she didn't look back. The colonel grabbed her arm when she got close enough, his grip bruising. "Foolish girl, did you really think I'd let you walk away from this?" "I didn't think you'd let me walk away at all." The colonel pulled her back toward his men. "You're right about that." "So what now? You kill me and restart the war?" "No, I take you back, hang you like I should have months ago, and use your execution to show Varon what happens to people who side against us." Alara's stomach twisted. "He won't care, won't he?" The colonel looked past her at Kael. "I think he will. In fact, I think he'll do something very stupid to try to save you, and when he does, we'll be waiting." Alara's mind raced. She'd walked right into exactly what Kael had warned her about, and now she'd made everything worse. The colonel started dragging her toward his horse. Alara looked back at the canyon one last time. Kael stood in the entrance, his face twisted with rage, and something that looked like grief. Their eyes met, and Alara saw the exact moment he made his decision. "No," she whispered. "Kael, don't." But he was already dropping his rifle. "Let her go," Kael shouted. "Take me instead." The colonel stopped. "Now this is interesting. I'm the one you want. The one who's been killing your soldiers, raiding your supplies. Let her go, and you can have me." "Kael, no!" Alara struggled against the colonel's grip. "Don't do this." The colonel's eyes gleamed. "Walk out here, Varon. Unarmed. Hands where I can see them." Let her go first. No, you come here, then I decide. Kale started forward. Stop! Alara screamed. He's lying. He'll kill us both. But Kyle kept walking. Slow, deliberate steps, his hands raised, his eyes locked on hers. When he was 10 feet away, the colonel smiled. Close enough. He raised his pistol and aimed it at Kale's chest. Alara didn't think. She drove her elbow back into the colonel's ribs, hard as she could. He grunted, his grip loosening for just a second. It was enough. Alara wrenched free and threw herself at Kyle, knocking him to the side as the gun went off. The bullet passed through the space where he'd been standing. They hit the ground hard. Kale's arms wrapped around her, rolling them behind the nearest boulder as gunfire erupted from both sides. You're insane, Kyle shouted. So are you. They were pinned down, bullets hammering the rock above them. Kyle pulled his knife, his only weapon, and looked at Alara. When I say run, you run. Back to the canyon. Don't stop. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you. Alara, no, we do this together or not at all. Kale's eyes blazed. Then he pulled her into a kiss, fierce and desperate. Together, he said. Together. Kale looked over the boulder, assessing. On 3. We run for that outcropping, then that ridge, then the entrance. Stay low and move fast. Alara nodded. 1. Her heart pounded. 2. She gripped Kale's hand. 3. They ran. Bullets tore up the ground behind them. Alara's lungs burned as she ran, Kale's hand iron tight around hers. They hit the outcropping and dropped behind it, gasping. You good? Kale asked. Still alive. That's good enough? Kale peered around the rock. The colonel's men were advancing, using the confusion to push forward, but Kale's warriors were firing from the ridges, slowing them down. Next cover is 30 yards, Kale said. Can you make it? Do I have a choice? No. Then I'll make it. Kale's mouth twitched despite everything. Ready? Alara nodded. They ran again. This time a bullet caught Kale's shoulder, spinning him sideways. He stumbled, but didn't fall. Alara grabbed him, keeping him upright, and they crashed behind the ridge together. You're hit, Alara said, her hands already on his shoulder. It went through. I'm fine. You're bleeding. Later. Kale's face was tight with pain, but his eyes were clear. One more push. We can make it. Alara tore a strip from her shirt and tied it around his shoulder, tight enough to slow the bleeding. Kale hissed, but didn't pull away. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Above them, one of Kale's warriors shouted something in their language. Kale's head snapped up. What is it? Alara asked. They found the trap. What trap? Kale's eyes were fierce. The one I set 3 days ago in case this happened. Before Alara could ask what he meant, the ground shook. An explosion ripped through the canyon entrance. Rock and debris flew everywhere. The colonel's advancing soldiers scattered, some thrown backward by the blast. Kale had mined the entrance. Now! Kale shouted to his warriors. Hit them now! Gunfire erupted from every position. Caught in the open, disoriented from the explosion, the colonel's men fell back in chaos. Some tried to retreat. Others tried to find cover. None of them made it far. Kale pulled Alara to her feet. Come on, while they're scattered. They ran for the canyon entrance. The smoke from the explosion was thick, choking. Alara couldn't see more than a few feet ahead, but Kyle moved like he knew every inch by heart, pulling her through the chaos. They were almost to safety when a figure emerged from the smoke. The colonel. His uniform was torn, his face blackened with soot, but his gun was steady, aimed directly at Kyle. It's over, Varen, he said. Kyle stepped in front of Alara. Then shoot me and get it over with. Oh, I will, but first I want you to watch her die. The colonel's gun swung toward Alara. Time seemed to slow. Kale moved, but he was too far away. Alara saw the colonel's finger tighten on the trigger. She saw the hatred in his eyes. She saw her death coming and knew there was nothing she could do to stop it. Then Sari appeared behind the colonel and drove a knife into his side. The colonel's shot went wide. He stumbled, turning, trying to grab the girl. But Kyle was already there, his own knife flashing. The colonel went down hard and didn't get up. Silence fell over the battlefield. Slowly, the smoke cleared. Bodies littered the ground, most of them soldiers. Kyle's warriors began emerging from their positions, weapons still ready, eyes scanning for threats. But the fight was over. The colonel's battalion was broken. The survivors were already running, disappearing into the desert. Kael stood over the colonel's body, his chest heaving. Blood ran down his arm from the shoulder wound, dripping onto the ground. Ilara walked to him slowly. Kael. He didn't move. Kael, it's over. He turned to look at her. His eyes were dark, haunted. Is it? Yes. Look around. They're gone. Kael's gaze swept this battlefield. Then he dropped to his knees, exhaustion finally catching up with him. Ilara knelt beside him. Let me see your shoulder. Later. Now. Kael let her peel back the makeshift bandage. The wound was deep but clean. The bullet had gone straight through, just like he'd said. Ilara pressed the cloth back against it. You need stitches, she said. I need to check on my people. You need to stop bleeding first. Kael looked at her, and something in his expression cracked. I thought I lost you. You didn't. When he pointed that gun at you, I know, but I'm still here. Kael pulled her against him with his good arm, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. Ilara wrapped her arms around him and held on just as hard. Around them, the canyon slowly came back to life. Warriors descended from the ridges. Women emerged from the caves. Children peeked out from hiding places. The wounded were carried to Mara's station. The dead were covered with blankets. Sari stood a few feet away, the bloody knife still in her hand. She was shaking. Ilara pulled away from Kael and went to the girl. Sari, look at me. Sari's eyes were wide, unfocused. I killed him. Yes, you saved our lives. I didn't know it would feel. I know. Ilara took the knife gently and set it aside. Then she pulled Sari into her arms. The girl collapsed against her, sobbing. Kael watched them for a moment. Then he stood and walked toward the center of the camp, where people were gathering. They looked at him expectantly, waiting for orders, waiting for him to tell them what came next. Kael took a breath. Count the wounded, count the dead. Secure the entrance in case they come back. His voice was steady despite everything. And someone bring me a list of our supplies. We need to know what we have left. People scattered to follow his orders. Mara appeared beside him. Your shoulder, she said. Later. Now, or you'll bleed out before sunset. Kael looked like he wanted to argue, but Ilara was already walking over with Sari, and the look on her face told him he wasn't going to win this one. Fine, he muttered. Mara led him to the medical shelter. Ilara followed, still holding Sari's hand. The girl hadn't stopped shaking. Mara worked efficiently, cleaning the wound, stitching it closed. Kael didn't make a sound, but Ilara saw the tension in his jaw, the white-knuckle grip he had on the edge of the table. When it was done, Mara wrapped his shoulder in clean cloth and stepped back. You're lucky. Another inch to the left and it would have hit the artery. Luck had nothing to do with it. Then what did? Kael looked at Ilara. Stubbornness. Despite everything, Ilara smiled. Takes one to know one. Mara shook her head. You're both insane. Now get out of here so I can deal with people who are actually dying. They left the shelter. Outside, the sun was setting, painting everything in shades of orange and red. The canyon looked beautiful and terrible all at once. Sari finally spoke. What happens now? Kael looked down at her. What do you mean? The soldiers. Will they come back? I don't know. Maybe, but not for a while. And if they do? Then we fight again. Sari's face crumpled. I don't want to fight again. Kael knelt in front of her, ignoring the pain it caused his shoulder. I know, but sometimes we don't get to choose. That's not fair. No, it's not. Kael's voice was gentle. But you were brave today. Braver than most warriors I know. You saved lives. Remember that. Sari nodded, tears streaming down her face. Then she threw her arms around Kael's neck and buried her face in his good shoulder. He held her awkwardly, like he didn't quite know what to do with a crying child. Ilara's chest ached watching them. This man who'd built walls around himself, who wore the role of warlord like armor, holding a traumatized girl and not knowing how to comfort her. It was the most human thing she'd ever seen him do. When Sari finally pulled back, Kael stood. Go find your mother. She's worried about you. Sari nodded and ran off. Kael watched her go, his expression unreadable. You're good with her. Alara said. I'm terrible with children. No, you're just terrible at admitting you care. Kael's mouth twitched. Maybe. They walked through the camp together as night fell. People were everywhere, tending to the wounded, repairing damage, cooking food over fires, the rhythm of survival. It should have felt depressing, but somehow it didn't. There was something almost defiant about it. We're still here. We're still alive. One of the older warriors approached Kael. We counted the dead. We lost 8, 19 wounded. Kael's face went hard. And them? 37 dead, maybe 20 escaped. Kael nodded slowly. Mark the graves. We bury ours at first light. And theirs? Burn them. The warrior left. Alara touched Kael's arm. 8 people. I know. That's not... Don't. Kael's voice was sharp. Don't tell me it's not my fault. Don't tell me we won. 8 people are dead because I didn't see this coming. You couldn't have known... Yes, I could have. I should have. Kael's hands clenched into fists. I should have killed the colonel the first time he came here. Should have sent him back in pieces. Instead, I tried to negotiate, and now 8 of my people are dead. Alara stepped in front of him, forcing him to look at her. If you'd killed him then, the army would have sent 100 soldiers instead of 50. You made the choice that gave us the best chance. That's all anyone can do. It wasn't enough. It never feels like enough. But we're alive. Most of us. That has to count for something. Kael's eyes were dark with grief. I don't know how to keep doing this. Yes, you do. You get up tomorrow and you do it again, because that's what leaders do. I'm tired of being a leader. I know, but your people need you to keep going anyway. Kael pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. What if I can't? Then I'll help you. That's what I'm here for. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the growing dark. Around them, the canyon settled into night rhythms. Fires burned low. Conversations quieted. The world kept turning. Eventually, Kael pulled back. Come with me. I want to show you something. He led her up to the rock where they'd sat before, overlooking the desert. But this time, instead of sitting, he kept climbing. Higher, up a narrow path Alara hadn't noticed before. Where are we going? She asked. You'll see. They emerged onto a flat plateau at the very top of the canyon. From here, Alara could see everything, the camp below, the desert stretching endlessly in every direction, the mountains rising in the distance. The sky was huge and full of stars. I come here when I need to think, Kael said, when everything gets too heavy. Alara turned slowly, taking it all in. It's incredible. It helps me remember why I'm fighting, what I'm trying to protect. Kael looked out at the horizon. 10 years ago, I came to this canyon with nothing, just anger and a need to survive. The people here, they took me in, gave me a place, and slowly I built something, not just a refuge, a home. You did more than that. You built a family. Kael's laugh was bitter. Some family, half of them are terrified of me. No, they respect you. There's a difference. Is there? Kael turned to face her. You saw how they look at me, Alara. Like I'm something other than human. The wolf, the legend, not a man. I don't look at you like that. I know, that's why I can't lose you. Alara's throat tightened. You won't. You don't know that. Today proved it. One bullet, one mistake, and you could have been gone. But I wasn't, and neither were you. Kael shook his head. We got lucky. Luck runs out. Then what do you want to do? Push me away? Keep me at a distance so it hurts less when something happens? Maybe that would be smarter. Maybe. But we're way past smart. Alara stepped closer. I love you, Kael. I don't know when it happened or how, but I do. And I'm not going anywhere. Kael stared at her. You shouldn't love me. Too late. Alara, do you love me? The question hung in the air between them. Kael's jaw worked like he was fighting with himself. Finally, he said, yes, more than I've ever loved anything, and it terrifies me. Good. Be terrified. Be human. Feel things. Alara's voice shook. But don't push me away because you're scared. I'm scared too, but I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. Kael's control finally broke. He crossed the distance between them in 2 steps and kissed her like she was oxygen, and he was drowning. Elara kissed him back just as desperately, her hands in his hair, his good arm crushing her against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know what happens next," he said quietly. "The army will regroup. They'll come back. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but they will. And I don't know if we can survive it again. Then we find another way." "What way?" "I don't know yet, but we will." Kale's eyes searched hers. "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, what was all of this for?" They stayed on the plateau until the moon rose. Then they climbed back down together, hand in hand, and returned to the camp. The next 3 weeks were a blur of work. They buried the dead. They tended to the wounded. They reinforced the canyon defenses and rationed supplies. Scouts reported that the army had pulled back to their main garrison, regrouping. No one knew when they'd return, but everyone knew they would. Kale spent his days planning, strategizing, trying to figure out how to protect people with dwindling resources and no good options. At night, he came to Alara's shelter and collapsed beside her, too exhausted to do anything but hold her. Alara worked alongside the women during the day, grinding corn, hauling water, helping with whatever needed doing. But at night, she worked on something else. She was writing letters. Not to the army, not to the colonel's superiors, to someone else entirely. There was a territory to the north, beyond the mountains, a place where the army had no jurisdiction, where different laws applied. Alara had heard about it in prison, a settlement run by people who'd walked away from everything and built something new. Outcasts, criminals, refugees, people with nowhere else to go. It was a long shot, but it was something. She wrote carefully, explaining the situation. The canyon people weren't rebels or enemies. They were just trying to survive. They wanted peace, but not at the cost of being slaughtered. If the northern settlement would agree to shelter them, or at least trade with them, it might give them options beyond fight or die. She didn't tell Kyle what she was doing, not yet. She didn't want to give him hope if it turned out to be nothing. But 3 weeks after the battle, a rider appeared at the canyon entrance. Not a soldier. A messenger, carrying a response. Alara's hands shook as she opened it. The northern settlement was interested. They couldn't promise protection, but they'd agree to trade. Food, medicine, ammunition, in exchange for labor, guides through the mountains, information about army movements. It wasn't salvation, but it was a lifeline. Alara brought the letter to Kyle. He read it twice, his expression unreadable. "How did you do this?" he asked finally. "I wrote to them, weeks ago. I didn't tell you because I didn't know if they'd respond." "You should have told me." "Would you have let me send it?" Kyle was quiet. "Probably not. That's why I didn't tell you." Kyle looked at the letter again. "This doesn't solve everything. The army won't stop hunting us just because we have trading partners. No. But it gives us options, resources, a way to survive that isn't just fighting. You think they'll honor this? I think they're like us. People trying to survive. That's more trustworthy than any treaty the army would offer." Kyle set the letter down and looked at her. "You did this for us." "I did it for you." Something shifted in Kyle's expression. "No one's ever—" He stopped, struggling for words. "No one's ever fought for me before, not like this." "Get used to it." Kyle pulled her into his arms, careful of his healing shoulder. "What did I do to deserve you?" "Nothing. That's the point. You don't have to deserve it. You just have to accept it." Kyle's laugh was rough. "I'm working on that." They presented the offer to the council that night. Reactions were mixed. Some people were suspicious of outsiders. Others were desperate enough to try anything. But eventually, they agreed to send a delegation north to negotiate terms. Kale wanted to go himself. Alara argued against it. "You're the leader here," she said. "If you leave, people panic. Send someone you trust." "I trust you." Alara blinked. "What?" "You started this. You should finish it. Go north. Negotiate. Make sure they understand what we need." "Kyle, I can't." "Yes, you can. You're smarter than half my warriors and better with words than all of them." He paused. "And they'll respect you more than they'd respect me. You're not the wolf. You're just someone trying to help her people." Alara's chest tightened. You trust me that much? More than anyone. So Alara went north with 3 of Kael's warriors as escort. The journey took 5 days through brutal mountain passes and unforgiving terrain. But when they reached the settlement, Alara understood why these people had survived. They'd built something remarkable. Not pretty, not comfortable, but functional. A town carved out of stone and determination, where people who'd been cast out everywhere else had found a place to belong. The negotiations took 2 days. Alara laid out what the canyon could offer: skilled guides, information networks, labor for seasonal work. In exchange, they needed food, medicine, ammunition, and occasional safe passage for refugees. The settlement's council listened carefully. They asked hard questions. They didn't trust easily. But they understood survival in a way the army never would. In the end, they agreed, not to an alliance, not to protection, but to trade. Fair terms, regular shipments, mutual benefit. It was more than Alara had hoped for. She returned to the canyon 6 days later, exhausted and wind-burned, but carrying signed agreements and a promise of the first supply shipment within 2 weeks. Kael met her at the canyon entrance. He didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms and held her. You did it, he said quietly. We did it. No, this was you. Kael pulled back and looked at her. You gave us a future, a real one, not just survival, but a way forward. Alara's eyes burned. It's not perfect. Nothing ever is, but it's enough. That night, the canyon celebrated. Not loudly. They couldn't afford to draw attention, but genuinely. People shared food, told stories, laughed for the first time in weeks. Children played. Warriors relaxed. For one night, the weight lifted. Alara sat beside Kael at the central fire, watching people enjoy themselves. Sari was teaching some of the younger children a game. Mara was arguing with one of the elders about medicine rationing. Life, messy and imperfect, and continuing. You know what I realized? Kael said quietly. What? For 10 years, I've been focused on keeping people alive. Just survival, day to day. But you showed me something different. What's that? That survival isn't enough. People need more than that. They need hope, purpose, a reason to keep going beyond just not dying. Alara leaned against his good shoulder. You gave them that. You built this place. You protected them. I gave them a fortress. You gave them a future. We both did. Together. Kael's arm tightened around her. Together. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire. Eventually, Kael spoke again. The army will find out about the northern settlement. They'll know we have support. Probably. They might leave us alone after that, or they might come harder. I know. Does that scare you? Alara thought about it. Not as much as it should. I think I'm too tired to be scared anymore. Kael laughed, the sound rough but genuine. I know the feeling. What do you want, Kael? If you could have anything. Kael was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I want to wake up next to you every morning and not have to count who died overnight. I want to make decisions about where to plant crops instead of where to position snipers. He stopped. I want peace, real peace, not just the absence of war, but actual quiet. Do you think we'll ever have that? I don't know, maybe, if we're lucky and careful and willing to fight for it. Alara turned to look at him. Then that's what we'll do. Fight for peace instead of just survival. It's a strange thing to fight for. So are we. Kael smiled, a real smile, soft and unguarded. Yes, we are. The supply shipment from the northern settlement arrived 2 weeks later, exactly as promised. Food, medicine, ammunition, tools. More than the canyon had seen in months. People wept when they saw it. And 3 days after that, an army patrol appeared at the canyon entrance. Everyone froze. Weapons were raised. Warriors took positions. Alara's heart hammered as she stood beside Kael, waiting. But the patrol didn't attack. They just delivered a message. The new colonel, the old one's replacement, wanted to negotiate. Real negotiations this time. No traps, no tricks. He proposed a meeting at a neutral location, with both sides bringing equal numbers of people. Kyle read the message twice. Then he looked at Alara. What do you think? I think it's suspicious, but also potentially real. The army lost a lot of men in that battle, and they know we have northern support now. Maybe they actually want peace. Or maybe it's another trap. Maybe. But if we don't try, we'll never know. Kyle nodded slowly. Then we go, but carefully, very carefully. The meeting was set for a week later, in a canyon halfway between the army garrison and Kyle's territory. Both sides would bring 10 people. No weapons within the meeting space, but guards could stay armed at a distance. Kale chose his people carefully. Warriors he trusted. Mara, because she was respected by everyone, and Alara, because she could read the treaty language and catch lies. The night before they left, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay in Kyle's arms, listening to his heartbeat. What if it's a trap? She asked quietly. Then we fight our way out. What if we can't? Kyle's arms tightened. Then we die together. But I don't think it will come to that. Why not? Because the army's learning the same thing we did. War is expensive, peace is cheaper, and they're finally smart enough to figure that out. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point? Alara smiled in the darkness. That's my line. I learned from the best. The meeting location was exactly as described, a wide, flat canyon with good sight lines and no places for ambushes. The army contingent was already there when Kyle's group arrived. The new colonel was younger than the old one, with sharp eyes and a careful demeanor. Both groups approached slowly, stopping at the designated line. For a moment, no one spoke. The tension was thick enough to cut. Then the new colonel stepped forward. I'm Colonel Reeves. I'm authorized to negotiate on behalf of the Territorial Army. Kyle stepped forward too. I'm Kyle Varen. I speak for the Red Canyon. I know who you are, Mr. Varen. Your reputation precedes you. And yours is blank. Let's keep it that way. Reeves's mouth twitched. Fair enough. Shall we begin? They sat at a table someone had dragged out into the canyon. Alara sat beside Kyle, across from Reeves and his translator. Documents were spread between them. Let me be direct, Reeves said. The previous colonel made mistakes. He saw you as an enemy to be eliminated. I see you as a problem to be solved. And the best solution for both of us is a workable agreement. What kind of agreement? Kyle asked. You stop raiding our supply lines. We recognize your territorial claim and leave you alone. We provide limited support, medicine, tools, occasionally food, in exchange for information about hostile forces in the region. What hostile forces? There are other groups operating in these mountains. Raiders, bandits, people actually interested in destroying our settlements. You help us deal with them. We help you survive. Everyone wins. Kale looked at Alara. She examined the documents carefully, reading every clause, every subsection. This time there were no hidden massacres, no trap clauses, just straightforward terms. It's clean, she said quietly. As far as I can tell. Kyle turned back to Reeves. And if we break these terms, what happens? The agreement is void. We go back to the way things were. You mean you attack us? We defend our interests, just like you would. Kale leaned back. I want one addition. What's that? If we break the agreement, you give us warning. 24 hours to evacuate civilians before you attack. Children, elderly, people who can't fight. They get safe passage. Reeves considered. And if you break the agreement, you give us the same consideration. Advanced warning if you're planning action that violates terms. Agreed. They negotiated details for 3 hours. Boundaries, trade terms, information sharing protocols. It was tedious, exhausting work. But slowly, something real took shape. When they finally finished, Reeves stood and offered his hand. I think we have an agreement, Mr. Varen. Kale looked at the hand for a long moment. Then he stood and shook it. We do. But if you betray this, Colonel, there won't be enough soldiers in the territory to protect you from me. Noted. And if you betray it, I'll make sure the legend of the wolf ends in a way that discourages anyone from following your example. Also noted. They signed the documents. Both sides witnessed. The agreement was official. As they prepared to leave, Reeves approached Alara. Miss Quinn, I looked into your case. Alara went still. And? The man you killed was a known abuser. Multiple complaints filed against him. Nothing ever prosecuted because he had connections. Reeves's voice was quiet. What you did was illegal, but it wasn't wrong. That doesn't change my sentence. No, but I'm authorized to offer you a pardon, full reinstatement of rights. You can return to regular society if you want. Alara's heart stopped. She looked at Kyle. He was watching her, his expression carefully neutral. What would you do if I said yes? She asked Kyle quietly. Let you go. You've earned the right to choose your own life. And if I choose to stay? Kyle's eyes softened. Then I'd spend every day grateful you did. Alara turned back to Reeves. Thank you for the offer, Colonel, but I'm staying. You're sure? This is a hard life out here. I'm sure. This is where I belong. Reeves nodded. Then I wish you well, Miss Quinn. He and his people rode away. Kyle's group watched them go until they disappeared over the ridge. Then Kyle turned to Alara. You could have left, gone back to a normal life. I don't want normal. I want this. Why? Alara looked at the canyon, at the warriors standing guard, at the life they'd built in the impossible spaces between war and peace. Because normal people don't get to choose who they become. They just become what everyone expects. But here, I get to choose every day. And I choose you. I choose this. Kale pulled her close and kissed her, not caring who was watching. When he pulled back, his eyes were fierce. I love you, Alara Quinn. I love you too. They rode back to the canyon together as the sun set. The agreement was in Kyle's saddlebag, a real treaty with real terms that might actually hold. It wasn't perfect. There would still be challenges, conflicts, hard choices, but it was better than constant war. It was a chance. When they reached the canyon, people gathered to hear what had happened. Kyle stood before them and explained the terms. The room was silent as he spoke. This doesn't solve everything, he said. We still have to work, still have to be careful, but it gives us space to build instead of just survive. It gives us a future. What kind of future? Someone called. Kale looked at Alara, then back at the crowd. Whatever kind we want to build, together. The cheers were cautious at first, like people didn't quite believe it. But slowly, they grew. People hugged each other, wept, laughed, the weight of constant fear lifting just a little. That night, Kyle and Alara stood on their plateau, looking out at the desert. The stars were bright, the air cold and clean. What now? Alara asked. Now we do the hard part, building peace instead of fighting war. Think we can manage it? I have no idea, but I'm willing to try. Alara leaned against him. Me too. They stood in silence for a while. Then Kyle said, I've been thinking. About what? About what you said. About choosing who we become. He turned to face her. I don't want to be the wolf anymore. I want to just be Kyle, a man trying to build something good, with you. Alara's eyes burned. Then that's who you'll be. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You decide who you are, no one else. Kale's smile was soft. When did you get so wise? When I met a stubborn warlord who taught me that surviving isn't enough, you have to live too. I didn't teach you that. Yes, you did. You just didn't realize it. Kale pulled her close, and they stood together watching the stars. Two people who'd been sentenced to die, who'd found each other in the worst circumstances possible, who'd chosen to build something instead of just surviving. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would still be hard days ahead, conflicts with the army, struggles with resources, the constant work of maintaining peace. But they'd face it together. And that was enough. 3 months later, Alara stood in the canyon center, surrounded by people she now called family. Mara was teaching her to make medicine from desert plants. Sari was practicing her English, reading aloud from one of the grammar books. The warriors were sparring, training not for war, but just to stay sharp. Kyle was meeting with a delegation from the northern settlement, negotiating expanded trade routes. When he finished, he found Alara near the fire. How did it go? She asked. Good. They want to establish a permanent trading post halfway between our territories. That's ambitious. That's progress. Alara smiled. Look at you, a diplomat instead of a warrior. I still know how to fight. I know. You just don't have to anymore. Kyle sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. You know what I realized today? What? I'm happy. For the first time in 10 years, I'm actually happy. Elora's chest tightened. Me too. They sat together as the sun set, painting the canyon in shades of gold. Around them, life continued its messy, imperfect rhythm. People working, laughing, living, not just surviving anymore. Actually living, because that's what Elora had learned in all of this. Survival is important, but it's not enough. You have to choose something more. Something worth fighting for, something worth building. For Kale, it was his people. For Elora, it was the man beside her and the family they'd created together. For both of them, it was the stubborn refusal to let the world break them. They'd been given impossible choices and made them anyway. They'd walked into fire and refused to burn. They'd found each other in the darkness and built something that looked like light. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was theirs. And sometimes that's all any of us get. The chance to choose who we become. The courage to build something in the ruins. The grace to love someone even when the world says we shouldn't. Elora had been sentenced to die. Instead, she'd learned to live. Really live. Not in spite of the hardship, but because of it. The canyon had stripped away everything she thought she was and shown her who she could become. A teacher. A fighter. A survivor. A partner. A woman who chose her own fate instead of accepting the one handed to her. Kale had been the wolf for so long, he'd forgotten he was a man. Elora reminded him. And in return, he'd shown her that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about putting yourself back together after you do. They weren't heroes. They were just two broken people who'd found each other and decided to build something better than they'd been given. And as the stars came out over the Red Canyon, Elora knew that whatever came next, they'd face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together. Not because it was easy, but because some things are worth choosing, even when the cost is high. Some people are worth fighting for, even when the odds are impossible. And some loves are worth holding on to, even when the world tries to tear them apart. Elora Quinn had walked into the canyon expecting to die. Instead, she'd found a reason to live. And that made all the difference.